So again, we are so glad that you have taken time out of your day. We are dealing with the topic of marriage and truth from Matthew chapter 5. This is chapter 14 of 15. This is now our 14th week together since we shut everything down. So it's amazing how short a time frame that feels like, and then how immensely long that feels all at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Carol, would you mind opening us up with prayer?
Sure. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful that we can gather together, even though we're miles apart, that we can study your word. And I'm thankful for like-minded people. And I look forward to this evening's time with two or more gathered in your name as we pray and study your word. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So we're still dealing with chapter 3 of Thoughts on the Mount of Blessing, and it's Matthew 5:31 through 37, and we're also going to pick up a little bit of Matthew 19, 3 through 8, so you'll kind of see where those fall in. Let me share my screen.
Those are more.
Here we go. Pull everything over so I can see all you beautiful people. Marriage and truth. So I'm gonna need a lot of help with this one when they talk about marriage comparisons. So we'll see. We'll talk to the wise and stately gurus in our bunch. All right, who would like to start reading for us?
Yeah, I could.
Great, thank you.
Looking out on that crowd on the hillside, Jesus could see much misery. The poor, the hungry, the outcasts of society all followed him in hope that there was more, that God really did care about them. In those days, being wealthy and successful was considered a sign of God's pleasure with you. A person could only be that wealthy if God is blessing them. They must be living the way God wants them to, it was thought. And naturally, the opposite was true as well. A person that poor, that pathetic, that hopeless must surely have been rejected by God. That person must be a great sinner. Jesus spent a great deal of time combating this attitude. He went to parties with prostitutes and tax collectors. He told the story of the rich man and Lazarus, where the rich man was not the one God favored. He spoke out in favor of the widow who gave only a mite instead of the rich man who gave significantly more. On this morning, Jesus spoke out against another practice that was causing much misery, the divorcing of one's wife. By interpreting the words of Moses in a specific way, the religious leaders had declared that it was acceptable to divorce one's wife for almost any reason. This allowed men to trade in their old wives for new ones, younger or richer ones. While technically this allowed the woman to remarry as well, unless they were independently wealthy, it seldom worked that way. Most often, the woman was left penniless and dependent on extended family, the charity of others, or prostitution to feed herself and her children. These easy divorces destroyed families and left the innocent trapped in a brutal struggle for survival. And the idea that this was acceptable to God, that this was God's plan for families, was an evil Jesus had to speak out against. In words that must have caused shame among some in the crowd, Jesus spoke out against the easy divorce. On this and other occasions, he pointed people back to the Garden of Eden and God's original plan for marriage. A faithful marriage of love can bless not just the family, but the community. A loving family on earth can be our clearest example of the family of heaven. Jesus also knew that many of the people there on the hillside felt free to take oaths that didn't use God's name. They used these oaths to get away with deception, the way the fine print of contracts is too often used today. They could deceive another person that way, but couldn't be accused of lying because what they said was technically true. Jesus condemned this kind of oath-taking because it was used as a way to get away with lying and cheating while still pretending to faithfully follow God. We may not take these kinds of oaths today. We too easily find ourselves gossiping about others, sharing damaging or embarrassing information or suggestions. Far too often we cloak our gossip in the holy garb of prayer requests. We may sound caring and spiritual when we say, pray for them, they're having marriage problems again. Or pray for her, I guess she's still struggling with that bad habit. But we are damaging reputations and lives when we do this. Jesus' teaching to us today would be the same as it was that morning. Don't say more than you need to, particularly when speaking about others. We may not be technically lying when we repeat what we've heard or assume we know the motivation of others' actions. But when our words result in damage to someone's name or reputation, we would find ourselves condemned by Jesus, like those he spoke about on the hillside.
All right, we are going to deal first with the marriage part of it, and then we're going to go into the oath taking after that. Does anyone have any comments they want to share before we go on? Any thoughts? Okay. So then we'll go back to sharing. Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife? Matthew 19:3. So this is the little detour we're going into Matthew 19:3-8, but also corresponds with the Sermon on the Mount as well. And so this next section comes from Thoughts on the Mount of Blessings, pages 63-65.
Christy, before you go on,
Yes.
you were saying that if we had any questions about marriage, what does marriage have to do with oath taking? That I didn't understand page 4 of that last section.
So what it is this is divided into 2 sections. So the first section, so that
No,
first.
No, I know that, but page 4 of the first section, it was talking about oath taking and
Right.
slandering people and doing that. How I don't understand that.
So that first part was an introduction to this chapter, and this chapter
this is going to explain it.
Yep. So the chapter split into 2 sections. The first part is dealing with marriage, and then the second part is going to deal with oath taking.
Oh, okay. So this will explain my question then.
Right. But
Okay,
also think about it. Marriage is an oath that you take. So.
Well, I know, but they said the oath was slandering people.
When you use it to slander people.
Okay, I'm still not with it. So, okay,
so
hopefully this will do good.
We'll get that. So we're going to do marriage first, and then we'll talk about when you're misusing oath taking. Because it'll also talk about not all oath taking is what's being talked about. There are some that is okay. And we'll get to that. I promise. And if we don't, remind me. But I'm pretty sure it's in there. Who would like to start to read for the Thoughts of the Mount of Blessings?
I can start.
Okay, great.
I read 1-3 and somebody else pick up 4-6. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay. Among the Jews, a man was permitted to put away his wife for the most trivial offenses, and the woman was then at liberty to marry again. This practice led to great wretchedness and sin. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus declared plainly that there could be no dissolution of the marriage tie except for unfaithfulness to the marriage vow. Everyone, he said, that putteth away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, maketh her an adulteress, and whosoever shall marry her when she is put away committeth adultery. When the Pharisees afterward questioned him concerning the lawfulness of divorce, Jesus pointed his hearers back to the marriage institution as ordained at creation. Because of the hardness of your hearts, he said, Moses suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. He referred them to the blessed days of Eden, when God pronounced all things very good. Then marriage and the Sabbath had their origin, twin institutions for the glory of God and the benefit of humanity. Then, as the Creator joined the hands of the holy pair in wedlock, saying, a man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one. He enunciated the law of marriage for all the children of Adam to the close of time. That which the eternal Father himself had pronounced good was the law of highest blessing and development for man. Like every other one of God's good gifts entrusted to the keeping of humanity, marriage has been perverted by sin. But it is the purpose of the gospel to restore its purity and beauty. In both the Old and the New Testament, the marriage relation is employed to represent the tender and sacred union that exists between Christ and his people, the redeemed ones whom he has purchased at the cost of Calvary. Fear not, he says, thy Maker is thine husband. The Lord of hosts is his name, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. Turn, O backsliding children, saith the Lord, for I am married unto you. In the Song of Songs, we hear the bride's voice saying, my beloved is mine, and I am his. And he who is to her the chiefest among 10,000 speaks to his chosen one. Thou art all fair, my love. There is no spot in thee.
All right, who'd like to
I'll
pick
take
up?
over.
Thank you, Ed.
In later times, Paul the Apostle, writing to the Ephesian Christians, declares that the Lord has constituted the husband the head of the wife, to be her protector, the houseband, binding the members of the family together, even as Christ is the head of the church and the Savior of the mystical body. Therefore he says, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be subject to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church, and gave himself for it, might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be a holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their wives. Ephesians 5:24-28. The grace of Christ and this alone can make this institution what God designed it should be, an agent for the blessing and uplifting of humanity. And thus the families of earth and their unity and peace and love may represent the family of heaven. Now, as in Christ's day, the condition of society presents a sad comment on heaven's ideal of the sacred relation. Yet even for those who have found bitterness and disappointment, where they had hoped for companionship and joy, the gospel of Christ offers a solace. The patience and gentleness which his Spirit can impart will sweeten the bitter lot. The heart in which Christ dwells will be so filled, so satisfied with his love, that it will not be consumed with longing to attract sympathy and attention to itself. And through the surrender of the soul to God, his wisdom can accomplish what human wisdom fails to do. Through the revelation of his grace, hearts that were once indifferent and estranged may be united in bonds that are firmer and more enduring than those of the earth, the golden bonds of love that will bear the test of trial.
All right, before we get to our questions, anybody have any comments that they would like to share?
I was just thinking of how many broken homes, if you will, single parent families and stuff that are in this world, and just what a disaster it is to everything and to the family.
It very rarely does one action only impact one person. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what did Jesus teach about marriage in the sermon? Is the world a better place because of marriage? And is the church?
Well, even from the beginning, he said man wasn't made to be alone. So if he blessed the institution, I would think it would make the earth a better place.
We've seen, or I'm sure we've heard stories of people who are in isolation, who are feeling very isolated, either because they don't have a spouse that is attentive to them, or because they are single or living alone, or whatever the case may be during these times right now, right? And they're saying there's a huge uptick in mental health needs from being alone and being isolated, right? And also, this is a time too where couples who aren't used to spending so much time together are spending more time together. I actually had 2 different pastors on a group I'm at say there were couples in their churches that are ending up getting a divorce.
Oh, wow.
Because of everything that they've been ignoring, and their relationships have come to light. It can be really hard. My parents used to joke that when they both retired, they didn't know how to live together again.
Well, and a lot of people say that too, once the kids leave the family, as long as you're focused together, even if it's flawed on something else, you can get through a lot, but all of a sudden when it comes down to just you and the other person, it's like, oh my goodness, who are you?
So I'm going to ask a question to all the married folk out there. Are you the same person you were when you first got married? Or do you think you've grown and changed in some way? I'm not going to say whether it's good or bad, but...
No, I'm not.
And I would guess that your spouse is the same too, right? They are
Oh,
not
absolutely.
the same person that they were when you first got married.
Neither one of us are anywhere near the same.
Mm-hmm.
Sweeter as the years go by.
Aw. Are you saying you're sweeter, or are you saying Bond's sweeter?
I think we both.
Both. You better say
Good
that.
answer. Good answer.
Yeah, both. Could not be me. Not just me alone.
Mhm.
Yeah, sweeter as the years go by, even though problems comes, you have to talk to each other, discuss. Yeah, that's all.
So marriage isn't just super easy, it just happens.
It's not easy, but it will be easier if both of you will uh, be involved.
Mm-hmm. So aren't you glad that if you burn the toast 3 times, that's not enough for divorce? Right? That's what it was sometimes.
I say, apparently in the Bible it was.
Yeah, they just had to say 3 times, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. Done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
They didn't hear Christ when they said we have to forgive how many times?
yeah,
That's a lot of burnt toast.
that is a lot of burnt toast.
I saw something interesting on TV years ago. Robert Parker, who wrote the Spencer for Hire detective series, it was, I can't think of the name of the show, but anyway, so they were meeting with him and talking and so on, and they went to his apartment. Well, their house, they owned a 2-family house, and he lived in one apartment and his wife lived in the other apartment. And it was really interesting to see how they were each decorated. They didn't get into too much of their relationship, but I thought that must be interesting if you're, don't get along too much, but you really care about each other.
Yeah,
That's strange.
I've heard of a couple of some celebrity couples that do that. I was just reading a news article about Carson Daly. It just popped up on my feed, and his wife, once she got pregnant, they stopped co-sleeping. And they said they each get so much more better sleep now. So sometimes, yeah, go
They
ahead.
need a bigger bed.
That could be, yes. And I think part of it too is like he has to get up at like 3 a.m. to go to work, and she doesn't. So
Oh.
that could factor into it at some point too. So, do you think the world's a better place because of marriage? Or
Yes.
is the church a better place because of marriage?
Yes.
Well, Christ always compares his relationship to his people as the bride, and he's the husband or whatever. So I mean, that's what he kind of based everything on, is that relationship part of it. So I mean, it was really important to him.
So then what does that mean for us as a church? If we're his followers, we're his bride, what does that mean to us? Does that just mean that we just sit back and wait to be lavish with riches and be trophy wives?
I'm still waiting for the trophy wife. I hear it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah.
So, no, we don't sit back and wait, but it is relationship, it's about communicating and conferring back and forth and walking the walk each day.
Well, in what we've just read, he says it wants his relationship to be like marriage, and his attitude to the church. And marriage is an intimate relationship, and that's what God is looking for. He doesn't want it to be, let's talk once a day or in the morning and at night. He wants it all day. He wants it all.
And I would say also for the long haul. He doesn't want a one-night stand, right?
Exactly. No divorces. Let's make this thing work.
And he wants kind of like the undercurrent to be through everything, that we know and understand that he does have our back. There's a security, or there's a contentment that comes, or a peace that comes, when you know somebody else is there with you and walking it. And
I was just going to say, Jill, guess who's a stronger part of this relationship? It's sure not me.
Yeah.
And that's very much what it was like if you look at a marriage relationship in the Old Testament times, right? Chances are very rarely did the woman work outside the home. She was very much dependent, and we see that on situations of divorces gone bad in the Bible. She could be living on the streets. So it is that idea of, okay, God is the ultimate provider for us.
Right.
So even we feminists can get behind this one. So then, what would a family on earth look like? Because we know not all families on earth look like this. And what would it act like if it's representing the family of heaven?
Well, a family on earth, in my opinion, would have the purpose of serving others. And not only others outside the family, but within the family.
Kind of all moving in the same direction with that one purpose.
With that purpose, and you get your juice, if you want, from spending your personal time with Jesus, but spending that time together as a family also.
Yeah, they've done studies, and unfortunately I can't think of them off the top of my head because I wasn't thinking ahead to go research it, but there are benefits for kids who actually sit down to family dinner every night. They see benefits throughout their life of that time. And it's not just sit down and everybody's looking at their phone. It's sit down at dinner and you have discussions and you talk to each other.
Yeah, it's true, and the families, we were not as good as we could have been with our family worship time. and there's a blessing that comes from that. You know, it's never too late to start that and everything, and you get in the busyness of little ones and bedtimes and all that kind of stuff too, and just life. But there is such a blessing if you're stopping either for 15 minutes or a half an hour, and just everybody coming together for just a few moments.
I agree.
Any last words on marriage and family before we move to a completely unrelated topic of oaths?
I'm going to be very unpopular for saying this.
Let's go for it.
And I'm not trying to play devil's advocate, but it seems to me that we have records of God's way, but he also has, you Adventists may think I'm way off base. He also provides ways out of things, particularly way out of sin and reconciliation to him. And I don't think that he wants children to be in an abusive home, or a spouse, either a husband or wife, to be abused by their partners. And there are times when I feel that divorce is certainly should be sanctioned.
Yeah, I don't think you're
the exception, but
Absolutely.
yeah, and often people will say it's only for adultery or something like that, but when you look at the idea of it being a violation of the marriage vows, abuse is not part of the marriage vows. And so abuse is definitely, in the Adventist Church, that is an acceptable reason for divorce.
good.
So that's, yeah. Now there's some that won't go that way, but as a whole, the Adventist Church has made that stance. You should not live in fear for your life.
Yeah, and basically we have to remember that we don't walk in other people's shoes.
Thank you.
You physically, I mean, you think of abuse, you usually go immediately to the physical, but there is emotional abuse that is just as severe, and it's can be very caustic, like you say, for kids to grow up in this type of relationship, let alone I mean, it's usually the wife that you think of, but it could be the man too. But either one of them to have to be enduring that all the time, it's wearing, and it berates who you are. And we've all, well, most of us have probably seen somebody actually shrivel, because of the constant, bless you, the constant barrage that they get. So there's abuse in all kinds of forms that we just need to be careful of. But just a twist too, I know they gave in the Bible, he gave the, they did specifically, he said, for adultery, that they gave their quote sanction for it, whatever, if there's adultery. But yet we've got the story, where, God told Hosea, specifically, his wife was bad news. And they just said, you need to love her and take her back. And he did a few times, it wasn't just one and done, and life was hunky-dunky. So I think we just need to remember that we serve a God that is our creator and loves us, and just has a box. He doesn't have a box to figure things out for us. That we don't understand that. I just think we need to be able to allow ourselves that grace sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. And again, the Adventist Church in the last few years has become very aware, and has been working on clergy training and just member training on what abuse is. They have a whole thing called End It Now, and they do seminars in September every year and give us free information, things to pass out on how to get domestic violence. And it does talk about emotional abuse to spouses and children and all of that. And again, that's not to say that someone can't heal from that, and what that looks like and how that happens, and whether people in the same house or not is a whole different thing that we're not necessarily going to get into. But there should be no shame in that, because there's no love in abuse.
And I often think of what the actions of the parents, the effect that they have on the children. And so should the child look and say, oh, this is the way a husband should be, or this is the way a wife should be? It just, that's, that's really something that I think people need to really think about. You hear the phrase, let's stay together because of the children. Well, but what are you really teaching them?
And I've had friends who come from divorced homes and they're like, I wish our parents would have gotten divorced so much sooner. It would have been healthier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, not one answer for everything, and life is messy and complicated.
Sure is.
Yay. All right. So our next section, and Ed, the section's for you.
Okay.
No undercurrent there. I'm not trying to say anything. Never swear an oath is kind of where this comes from. Matthew 5:34, and it's going to dig a little bit more into it. And this section comes from the book Blessing, which is the easy reader version of Thoughts on the Mount of Blessings. And Thoughts on the Mount of Blessings, it's on pages 66 to 69. And this is kind of a long one, so if people want to split it up, that is great. But who would like to do some reading on this one for me?
I'll try my best.
Okay.
Mhm.
It's the writing is so tiny. I can't see. Hold on. Jesus gives the reason we should not swear. Don't swear. Oh my goodness. It's so. Don't swear an oath using the name of heaven, because heaven is, I'm sorry, I can't read it. It's so small.
Sure.
That's okay.
Can you read
I
it?
can
okay.
pick it up if you want.
One can read. Oh,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Carol.
Okay. Let's see. Don't swear an oath using the name of the earth, because the earth belongs to God. Don't even swear by your own head, because you cannot make one hair on your head become white or black.
Not talking
Everything
about
comes-
dying. Sorry, go ahead.
Everything, yeah, everything comes from God. We don't have anything that He hasn't given us. Actually, we don't have anything that wasn't bought for us by the blood of Christ. Everything we own comes stamped with the cross, bought with the most precious blood of all. So we have no right to vow or promise anything based on our word as if we owned it. The Jews interpreted the third commandment to forbid using God's name profanely, but they felt free to use and take other oaths. From the words of Moses, they knew they could not give false testimony, but they had ways to make sure that what they said was technically correct, even if they knew that it was not exactly truthful. They had no problem lying under oath or misleading others as long as their words were covered by some technical definition of the law. Jesus condemned their oath-taking, stating clearly that it was breaking God's law. But Jesus did not forbid the use of a judicial oath, which solemnly calls upon God to witness that what is said is the truth and nothing but the truth. Jesus himself testified under a judicial oath at his trial before the Jewish court. If he condemned such oath-taking, he would have spoken against it at that time. Many people have no problem lying to other people, but they feel much more reluctant to lie to God. Under oath, they feel as if their words are being judged by the one who reads hearts and knows the exact truth. Fear of his judgment encourages them to tell the truth, but Christians can testify under oath with no fears. Living their lives each day in the constant presence of God, they have no problem with God being their witness that what is said is the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Jesus saw that there was no need for oath-taking. He taught that all that was needed was speaking the exact truth at all times. Say only yes if you mean yes, and no if you mean no. If you say more than yes or no, it is from the evil one. These words should eliminate the use of meaningless phrases or near profane expressions. There is no place for false compliments, flattering lies, gross exaggerations, scams, or deceptive trade practices. Jesus' words teach that no one can be called honest who appears to be something he or she is not, and whose words don't tell what it is really going on. If we followed these words of Jesus, we would stop all of our unkind criticism of others. How can we comment on another's feelings or motives and be certain that we are speaking the exact truth? Too often, pride, momentary anger, and personal resentment influence the impression we give others. A glance, a word, even the inflection of our voice can be used to communicate a lie. Even the facts of a situation can be stated in a way that gives a false impression, and whatever is not truth is inspired by Satan. Everything that Christians do should be as transparent as the sunlight. Truth is of God. Deception, whatever form it takes, is of Satan. Still, it is not always simple or easy to speak the exact truth. We cannot speak the truth unless we know the truth, but so often preconceived opinions, personal bias, a lack of information, or errors in judgment prevent us from actually understanding the situation accurately. We cannot speak the truth unless our minds are continually guided by the one who is truth. Through the words of Paul, Jesus says, when you talk, do not say harmful things, but say what people need, words that will help others become stronger. Then what you say will do good to those who listen to you. Jesus makes it clear that pointless and unnecessary words, joking and inappropriate conversations are to be avoided. Our words should not only be truthful, but pure and uplifting. Those who are learning to follow Jesus will have no reason to dabble in things that are best done in secret or darkness. Our words, like our lives, will be simple, honest, and true, for we are training to live happily in the family of heaven.
All right, any comments on that before we get to our questions?
No more loopholes.
No, it just kind of reminds me of in the Disney film on Bambi, Thumper the little rabbit, he always gets called out and then mom says, what did I tell you? And he kind of does his mouth down his eyes and he says, if you can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all. And it's just so true.
I know.
Now it said, no pointless, unnecessary words, joking, or inappropriate conversations. Does that mean that we can't laugh and have fun?
No, it doesn't mean that.
There are some who think that you should never smile. You need to be very stoic in all your emotions, but that's not what this is saying here, right? There are
no, and there's a place for having some brevity or some lighter conversation at times too. There's a place for that to kind of break the tension or the whatever.
But it's not joking at someone else's expense.
Exactly.
Which is a lot of what we see today. A lot of jokes, and people have made careers out of prank shows and things like that are all about preying on different people and making jokes at other people's expense.
I have something here from Adventist Home about gossiping and talebearing.
Yep.
We think with horror of the cannibal who feasts on the still warm and trembling flesh of his victim, but are the results of even this practice more terrible than the agony and ruin caused by misrepresenting motive, blackening reputation, dissecting character? Let the children and the youth as well learn what God says about these things. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. The spirit of gossip and talebearing is one of Satan's special agencies to sow discord and strife, to separate friends, and to undermine the faith of many in the truthfulness of our positions. That's pretty strong.
It's a whole lot easier to tear down a reputation than to build one back up.
And it's a lot simpler to remember the truth than trying to remember all the lies you have to fabricate.
Yes. Oh, what a web we weave.
I liked in the first reading too that it talked about how we're real good or almost pious or whatever. We kind of cloak it and thinking we're doing good by when our prayers we say pray for so and so who's doing this or this or this. There's a lot of that goes on, and we need to just check ourselves sometimes. for our motives.
And sometimes you will have people say, I need, in order to help me be accountable, I'd like you to pray for this specific thing for me. But it's again, are you getting a little bit of joy from sharing what they are saying or not?
I think what you just said, what's your name?
Me?
Jill.
Jill.
About the, instead of mentioning it to everybody, go ahead and pray for them yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on the flip side, I always hate somebody will post something and say, prayers for me or something, and they won't give you any other detail.
Yeah.
That kind of gets me sometimes. It's like, oh my goodness.
And sometimes that's done for attention. Sometimes it's legit, but sometimes it's like, I want you to ask me.
Yeah, I try not to go there, but yeah, it's a little bit, I like to know specifics or something too. And I'm just like, really? So the humanness coming out.
Mm-hmm.
God knows the specifics, even if we don't.
This is true.
So, how often are we tempted to speak in ways that are technically correct, but not entirely truthful? And maybe what's an example of what that might be? And is it important for a Christian to be truthful all the time? How do we talk?
Truthful, yes, but not honest to the point where you're hurting another person.
So having compassion, not saying, hey, Ed, that shirt has got to go. Sorry. There's ways to do that. You don't need to bait someone by asking, does this shirt make me look fat either? Just to cause strife. But so what's a way in which we can be technically correct but not truthful? Because it talks about this, but it doesn't really give an example of what that might be like.
Yeah.
I think it mentioned at one point, sometimes it's the inflection, so you make it sound like it's sarcastic, but it's not. Like, oh, so that's what she's doing. So you can give it a connotation.
Or omission.
Mm-hmm.
You bring it to a point, but leave out the part that.
I think we see it, a lot of times if you watch shows on TV, or if you watch trials and just in general, they ask yes and no questions.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not wanting to know yes because or whatever. They just want to know yes or no. And then on the surface, it appears one way, but it's not the entire story.
And that could be, go ahead.
They ask a question in such a way that the yes answer will help their cause rather than expose the truth.
Mm.
And that can be tempting if we're trying to convince someone that to go with what we're thinking or follow our train of thought with something, we could do that. I think sometimes when we take Bible verses or on white quotes or something like that out of context, because it sounds like something's being said, but then when you go back, that's really not what it means. That's something that we can do as well to try to convince and proof something that maybe it wasn't there.
Facial expressions can have tell a lot. The eye roll, the smirk. You say a little something that's correct, and then you roll your eyes like, oh yeah, right.
Now, Jesus talked a little bit about the difference between taking a judicial oath. So judicial oath being, if you're called to a witness stand, and often you can put your hand on the Bible, or you could choose to do any other book, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. They're not, that is not in the same category as the oaths that Jesus was talking about here. And what is our basis for that distinction?
Well, about the judicial oath?
Yes.
Jesus had to take a judicial oath when he was on trial before the crucifixion, and he didn't hesitate to answer it.
Right. So it's not meant to deceive anyone, and it's the idea of not perjuring yourself. Because if you take an oath with the intent to perjure yourself, that's probably not a good idea either.
Right.
Well, and judicial oaths have to do basically with trials, where I think the other oaths were talking about, they weren't on a trial for anything necessarily, but they were just kind of swearing something to try to make a point, whether it was to make themselves look better or not, too. I think there's some of that.
Right. And hopefully, if there's a trial, the point of the trial is to find the truth.
Yes.
And it's a truth seeking and not something else. And of course, we don't have a perfect system. It doesn't always work like
Right.
that, but that should be the goal. I think that is to find the truth.
In a perfect world, absolutely.
So, yes, Sophia.
I'm a notary public myself, but it's required for my work. And when I do a notary, sometimes it's an acknowledgement and sometimes it's an oath. And when I do the oath, I do have to have the person to raise their hand and do the oath. And also I have to document it, because in case this person have to go to court or they need document in Massachusetts, it's required. I have to document it in the book. So it works for my notary. So I don't know. And the biblical part, I get confused though.
Well, that would be part of it too. You're signing that what they're saying or what they presented to you is what it was. So I used to have to, I was a notary back in the day too. So if you're saying, hey, this is the ID that they're giving me, then I'm saying, yes, that's who it is, or yes, this is who's signing this. And so validating truth. So how would speaking the truth at all times stop our unkind criticism of others? Would speaking the truth make your life better? How might it do so?
I think a lot of times the truth hurts. Just saying.
So sometimes speaking the truth means biting your tongue?
Yeah.
Or if you speak the truth about somebody, it's just like, I don't know, there's a time and a place.
That's where my mom would say, as Trumper's mom, if you can't say something nice, say nothing at all. That's how we were brought up.
Yeah.
Well, then there's the little white lie, like, how does this dress look on me? Ugly.
That's when you say, you know what? You are beautiful.
Thank you. That's a
Omission.
Yes, I always, I have different style, taste, and clothes as some of my friends and my mother as well. And so we always joke. They said, how do you like this? I said, I think it's beautiful for you.
Yeah. Well, obviously, if everything is truthful all the time, you wouldn't conjecture or you wouldn't doubt that somebody isn't honest and caring. Whereas now when you do some things, people say stuff or whatever, you don't always trust, or you look for the hidden agenda or something that's underneath what's being said.
Just because you know truth doesn't mean you have to say it.
That's true.
Because
and if you're always speaking, go ahead.
Here's another thing that I have on my notes on gossip. Am I telling this story to help build up others in Christ?
Yeah.
I'm going to try to find it. There's something that I see in classrooms a lot about if you're going to repeat something, ask if it's.
The 3 questions.
Yeah. I remember one, is it true? The other one, is it kind? And I can't remember what the other one was.
Well, I've got 3 more I can read. Am I certain that the facts are correct, first of all? Was the information given to me in confidence? And have I checked the facts with the person involved, the people involved? None of
Yeah.
us go. None of us go to that length.
And if you're always speaking the truth, you can't get caught in a lie.
Right, and it's very easy to pass on something that we haven't necessarily fact checked. That's the world of Facebook and social
Yes,
media, right? We're just gonna pass it
absolutely.
on. Here, I found that is it necessary? Is
Mm.
it true? Or is it kind? Because it could be true. It may not be necessary for the whole world or whoever you're talking to. No, kind of like what Ed was saying.
Yeah, but the last one is really important too.
Yeah. Because how you say it can make a big difference.
Yeah, I think it all depends on sometimes the person. Sometimes there are person that are too sensitive, can't take a joke or on how we say it, on what we say.
Yeah.
So it all depends on the situation.
That's me, Bon, right?
That's you. You got it. You read the.
I am fairly sarcastic as an individual, and I had a friend who was very sensitive, and we had an understanding that I could not be sarcastic around her because she took it too much to heart, and it was a hard lesson for me to learn that I was hurting her every time I was not trying to. And so then it took me adjusting how I dealt with her so that I could be kind to her and meet her needs.
Well, and that's just it. On the flip side, we don't necessarily mean to cause pain or hurt, but if it does, then if we know that that's the trigger point, we need to just step away from that. That's what friends do.
Yes.
Sometimes people are like, oh, you just need to get tougher skin.
Mm-hmm. No, I am where I am right now. So you just need to be gentle.
Exactly. So what is one way we can know that we are always speaking the truth? And I think Ed referred to this a little bit with his questions. Has it been verified, right? Is it worth saying?
And is it, I want to say it doesn't necessarily have to be uplifting, but is it, because sometimes the truth does hurt, and yet we do need to hear it to reset our gauges or whatever. But again, does it, what is the goal of it, the purpose of sharing it, and
Right.
if it always is for the betterment of somebody with kindness. I love the end one that said, is it kind?
Mm-hmm.
That was sort of reminds me of what Jesus did when he was talking with the priests and Pharisees, and once in a while we would tell them, hey guys, wake up. This is the way it is.
Yeah, you guys are a bunch of snakes.
Yes, that's right. And John the Baptist, he knew how to do that.
All right, any other thoughts? This is the end of our chapter. Any thoughts about marriage or truth or how they're connected or not?
No, Sophia just sent a note. There is a saying that you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. That is there. That is. Yeah.
Very much so. And so that is the ultimate truth. And who is the ultimate truth?
Jesus.
The word.
Yeah. So,
and the other thing I just want to say on the thing of marriage, there are people that find themselves single parenting or single in general or whatever, and it's through no fault of their own or anything, and we just need to allow that, and there's people that basically they have to be both spouses for their kids if they have a family, or if you're by yourself, that you have to make the decisions you can, even though you don't have a physical person in the house to help you bounce the ideas off of. And I love this saying that God helps. He does help to stand in the gap. I've seen it time and again, with some people in our family that have in my opinion, through no fault of their own, have found themselves in a single situation. And he does help us through. He does help us through.
Right. There can be blessings in singleness. It's not only in marriage that there is blessings. And I had someone who in my family, they don't always play fair or play nice if there's an argument. And so well, now I know why you're single, comes up every once in a while. And that's not always true either, although I probably am not great to live with these days. I'm too used to being stuck in my ways. Although I did survive a roommate for 3 months, so that's helpful.
It is.
Any other thoughts on truth? And so let's put the two together. Is truth important in marriage?
It's the foundation.
Okay.
Say, what did you say, Chris? I didn't hear it.
No. Is truth important in marriage?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which any meaningful relationship has to be built on trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Our final chapter next week, what we've been talking about all along is the kingdom of God. And so our final chapter is the mark of God's kingdom. And I kind of made an executive decision. We referred to it a little bit before. We're not going to do a study on July 1st or July 8th. And then if you are so inclined to pick back up with us that next week, which is July
15.
15, we're going to do the book of Isaiah. So feel free during those weeks to read the book of Isaiah through to kind of get a grasp of the whole thing before I go back. But you don't have to do that. Please, no pressure. If you would like to, you can. And again, no pressure to come back. We'd love to have you. But if you need to take a break, I get that too. But we'll pick back up on July 15th. We'll do the book of Isaiah. But we have one more week, one more chapter in this book, The Mark of God's Kingdom. And I am going to stop share and stop recording.